the second panel of the day, but first panel on a specific issue. And building on the previous session, let us now turn to these deep dives in specific priorities, and starting with the mainstreaming of climate and the environment in development cooperation. And to explore this question, and as I mentioned earlier, we'll have three types of intervention in this session. And first, we'll hear from OECD colleagues. So Ola Göransson, Senior Policy Analyst in Climate and Climate Change and Environment Unit, and Giorgio Gualberti, Statistical Analyst in the Statistical Standard and Method Unit in our directorate. And they will share with us kind of the building blocks of environment mainstreaming in development cooperation, how DAC members are currently stepping up their commitments on this issue, and how this mainstreaming on climate and environment looks like from a reporting standpoint with the real markers, what we call the real markers, and that will be explained by our colleagues. And that will set also the scene for our peer exchange, for which we are pleased to welcome Sandra Wibmer from the Austrian Development Agency, and who is advisor on the environment and climate action. And she will kind of guide us through the strategic framework of Austria on environment and climate mainstreaming, the tools, the entry points that are being used, and how they are reflected in the project cycle and some of the lessons learned. And finally, Mr. Jānis Brizga, head of the NGO Green Liberty, will reflect back on the discussion from the Latvian perspective and the current efforts, and most probably also some critical points that we can point forward. So, Ola, maybe over to you for the first intervention. Thank you so much.
Hello, thank you so much, Sydney, and hello everyone. Hello, Latvian colleagues. Very nice to meet you, and congratulations on this important work you're doing on development cooperation and the guidelines you have decided upon. So let me start by trying to share my screen. Like this. Hopefully you are you seeing this?
Perfect.
Yes, great, thanks. So yes, I'm Ola Göransson. I'm working here at the Secretariat, OECD Secretariat, and in particular at the Environment and Climate Change Unit. And very glad to be with you to talk about mainstreaming of climate and environment in development cooperation. So I will share some of the work that we have been doing here together with the Development Assistance Committee and the members there, and in particular with the network, the network for environment and climate change that we have with DAC members engaged in this. And basically, I was talking about some learning that we have from a big exercise that was done 2 years ago, a big exercise on how the DAC members work with mainstreaming climate and environment. And this was done through a comprehensive review, including questionnaires to the members, workshops, and also deep dives with 3 of the members, with visits to the European Union, to Sweden, and to Canada for peer learning exercise on how they would work with mainstreaming of climate and what learning can be taken from this. And this was documented in a quite comprehensive report that you see here, Greening Development Cooperation. And I'll talk about very briefly some of the learnings from that report. And of course, in this context, mainstreaming is defined as the deliberate and proactive integration of environmental concerns, including climate, into development policies, plans, budgets, and actions. So I think you can say that the findings, the learnings of this exercise establish sort of what are really the cornerstones for effective mainstreaming of climate and environment, and found that there are 5 components that need to be there. First of all, a strong policy commitment, leadership. You need to have the systems in place to facilitate your work with this. And it's a matter of working continuously with the capacities and the skills needed. You need to have the knowledge base and the shared knowledge base on what works and what doesn't work. And you need to have really a good working relationship and the functioning systems in your partner countries for mainstreaming to be successful. So very briefly then, some of the points under each of these headings. Starting point. I mean, it's really fundamental to have the legal basis for working with environment and climate. We need to have a strong legal and policy system in place to facilitate this. And going beyond that, you also need the practical leadership. It's not sufficient with the legal system in place and the quite right policies. You need to have to show in practice also within the organizations and with the politicians to actually show that they mean what they say, that they show leadership in terms of driving mainstreaming. And another point is that it can be quite effective to have specific targets, financial commitments on how to mainstream, to set targets for that. And some of the examples that are given in the report are, for example, then as you well know, the EU's quite strong, comprehensive package of the legal requirements, the European Consensus on Development Cooperation, and more recently the EU Green Deal, which also has, of course, important aspects pointing towards development cooperation, and leading on to the EU organizations and institutions, the EIB, the Director General for International Cooperation, and the work they're doing. So that would be one example of such a framework for legal requirements and leadership that can drive mainstreaming. And continuing then, and as I know that you're working very intensely in Latvia, you need to have a really robust system in place with the tools that help you to carry out the mainstreaming in practice. And as we heard quite just before by Chantal, it's not sufficient to do it at the planning stage. I think that's an experience of many members that it tends to be perhaps focusing a bit on the initial stages of programs and projects, but it's equally important to follow up during the implementation and monitoring review phases with the systems you have in place. And I mean, there are examples to be also to look at and perhaps be inspired from. For example, Canada, which has a really comprehensive system, including or integrated in their environmental integration process with the different pieces in place. You have Swedish SIDA, which is described quite comprehensively in the report, with the requirement in Sweden to have a very comprehensive environmental management system, followed up by a statistical handbook showing how to do this in practice, action plans, and a green toolbox, which is on the SIDA internet with all the different guidelines and tools that they're using for appraisal and following up and so forth. Continuing on to skills. What we're doing right now with you is very good. We're talking about how to jointly develop our skills and competences in this. And since we're talking about cross-cutting issues, including the climate and environment, we all in the organizations need to share these knowledge about how to work with these issues, because they're cross-cutting issues, they cross across programs. So interdisciplinary skills and a holistic view on how to tackle climate, environment, and the other challenges is needed. some examples here are, I mean, continuous training, and not just of environment staff, but staff across organizations, and including, of course, staff in partner countries that actually meet and work with our partners is quite important. Some other things that have shown to work quite well is for those that are most directly engaged, to have, because they tend to be in different parts of the organization, to have a network for engaging with each other, to support each other in how to actually work with the mainstreaming process has been quite successful. And another thing that that several members use are external help desks, for example, by engaging a university to be ready to stand by and help you in particularly tricky issues with expertise. And of course, something that is quite crucial is the knowledge to be able to analyze what works, what does not work. The evidence base needs to be there in terms of what's the actual effect of the mainstreaming efforts we do. What works in the real life situation, and this is quite crucial then to have the analytical the evidence base, and for this, working with, in our case, the CRS system is of course the basis for this, the credited reporting system, and applying the real markers in a comprehensive and adequate way. So therefore, I'm quite glad that Giorgio will follow after me and talk specifically about the real markers and how they can be applied, because that's really the basis for being able to have this, the possibility to do real analysis of your projects and programs, and also for have a broader learning across members. And it's also, of course, a matter of having a broader organizational learning. And I'm pointing here to one point for this quite important, also to engage beyond our organizations and our implementing partners, to include civil society in this shared knowledge. It's really important for both creating or acceptance and demand for environmental education to integrate with actors out there in the field, and also to get the first-hand knowledge of the local perspectives, and perhaps understand what the political economy is that facilitates or enables the mainstreaming of climate environment. And then lastly, but certainly not least important, rather the opposite, it's of course crucial to work with our country partners, developing countries that we want to work in. I mean, it's to have the commitment and the priorities of the leadership in these countries is you can't underline enough the importance of that. And of course, the need to work with the national context, that has to be the basis for the work we're doing, the national buy-in. And that also means that the capacity issue is a quite crucial one, to strengthen the capacity of our development partners to actually work with integrating the climate and environment perspective. So capacity support, fundamental, and also to have a broader take on this. I mean, the environment and climate as clustering unit is really touches on the fundamental development and poverty reduction issues of each country. And that means that it's not only an issue for counterparts in environment ministries. It's a broader issue that links to the economic development and the social development of these countries. So we need to broaden our audience and have dialogues with not only environment ministries but also with other ministries and agencies. That's, I think, an important point there.
Yes, can you, yeah, perfect.
Yes, so that was sort of the main points from that exercise. We have just recently followed up. We have done, following on from the last year's high-level meeting of the Development Assistance Committee and preparing for COP26 of a few weeks ago. We have done another review and asked all members on how they now continue working with climate environment. So there's a lot of information on what each country is doing in terms of their mainstreaming tools and processes in this report that just was published 2 weeks ago. So that's another source for information on topical points. And just to mention a few things, then it's that there are many members are now following the really great focus on climate and environment, are updating and strengthening the guidelines on mainstreaming. And we're also working with how to share between us these tools and guidelines to facilitate that work. Of course, biodiversity is really now, it's been with us, but it's really being much more focused on biodiversity together with climate in this. And not the least, the issue, I mean, we have now not so many years to sort out our really global crisis in terms of climate and environment. So how can we work with really transformational change is a topic that is being lifted more and more with our members. And just to finish then by perhaps pointing to the last quote here. So how can we move beyond mainstreaming in Indian project to have a systemic perspective and to really support transformation to environmental sustainability at the heart of development cooperation. That is sort of a sense of where many members are now thinking about how to develop further the mainstreaming. So with that, I will finish and hand over to next speaker. Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you so much, Ola, and Giorgio, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to all our colleagues. It's very pleasure to meet you virtually. So my colleague Ola talked about Rio markers. I will make a very brief presentation on the basic facts of this, so we can also have time to discuss. Actually, I have 25 slides, but I will make it just a couple, just 5 of them. So if you let me share my screen just a second. Hope this works like it should. Voila. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Okay. Voila. So what are Rio markers? Here we are talking about Rio markers are 4 statistical tools that we use to track mainstreaming of some environmental issues in development cooperation, in ODA. In practice, we have 4 Rio markers, which are some tools that we use for tracking that are on mitigation, on adaptation, on biodiversity, and on desertification. This is used, they are called the Rio markers because they are used to track ODA in support of the so-called Rio Conventions. And they have been introduced a long time ago, I mean in 1998 for some dedicated data surveys, and then more regularly, and finally they are become a permanent part of the data collection in 2008. And there was some revisions along the way to keep them updated with the climate conventions, with the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Convention to Combat Desertification. Biomarkers are not alone; they are in a system, I would say, of Rio and policy marker. We also have other colleagues, I think, that will talk about gender. So we'll not go through these. But just to say that it's a dynamic tool, and depending on the change, there are several changes that are being implemented, and this is also comes from the changes that are in the text of the conventions. So there is a perimeter, meaning that not every activity can be marked for your markers, but we say that the rules says that only activities that are so-called allocable are eligible for the RIO markers. What are allocable activities? So are there activities for which the provider knows where the funds go? For example, I mean, if you have a sector budget support, the provider knows that this goes for the energy sector or for the environmental sector, but on the other hand, for a general budget support, the provider of the fund does not know if this is for environment or rather, for example, for justice. And so there are some development cooperation modalities that are available to use for your markets, and you see it in this slide. So the markets can also be used by other official flows, so non-DAC, non-concessional finance, and actually we encourage donors to do so, but this is of course on a voluntary basis. So how does it work? The thing that is more crucial on the markers is the scoring system. So we have a scoring system based on 3 values, 0, 1, and 2. And the point here is to understand how much this is mainstreamed. Essentially, I mean, if this climate change mitigation or desertification is the principal activity, is the principal objective of the activity, or if it's an objective along with others. So how do we do that? So we ask if the objectives are included in the program and project document. If we ask if the objective match so-called eligibility criteria for your markers, and we ask if the activity would have been undertaken or designed that way without this objective. So in this case, we arrived to the score principal, significant, not targeted. So the score is called principal, for which if they are fundamental in the design and impact of the activity. So this means that the activity would not have taken place without that biodiversity objective. This is significant, essentially, if the activity is important, but it's not the principal reason. I mean, you will have done this project, this bridge, I mean, without any consideration on climate change adaptation, but you do it in a certain way for which this bridge will last time, of course. Or you can do it 0 if the activities is been assessed but it's been not targeted. And if you don't put anything, so if you put leave it blank or null, this means that the activities have not been screened. So one important issue is that the policy markers are descriptive rather than quantitative. So it gives information on the degree, and that also an activity can have more than one principal or significant policy objective. For example, something can be marked for climate change adaptation and mitigation, or for mitigation and gender. And another thing that's very important is that to qualify for the score principal or significant, but particularly for principal, the objective has to be explicitly promoted in the project documentation and also stated in the title and description that you give to us, so we can check, because we check all this data, and if the title and description does not include this theme at all, we will ask questions about that. So just the last couple of slides, so we leave space for the other intervenants. The qualitative scoring is important because we say that ODA activities that totaling $20 million have biodiversity as a principal objective or a significant objective. So we say biodiversity related ODA is 20 million. We do not say that ODA for biodiversity is 20 million. It's a subtle difference, but it's a very fundamental difference. We cannot say with RIO markers, we give to climate change 10 million, but we say activities that has an amount, commitment or disbursed value of 10 million have a climate objective. This is fundamentally different from what is reported to the UNFCCC, of course. And this is my last slide, and it's about 4 things. The first is that the methodology is purpose-based, so we're not looking at the result, as that was very well explained by Chantal before me, but we look at the purpose of the activities. What is the objective of the activities? So the second is that each marker, as I said, is marked independently, although there are some interlinkages, of course. I will not go through this now, and but each marker is independent. We do not think that you should have, 4 or 5 policy markers that are principal, because normally you have just one, or in few cases 2, but in any case they are independent. And also is that the relation between the activity and the objective should be clearly communicated and made explicit. We need to have a title, or we need to have a description in which we understand that biodiversity is there somehow. And the point is that the justification should be based on the written material, so on the project document. If in the project document is written that something supports one of these conventions, then this can be marked. And with this, I stop here and welcome any question. I just want to say my very last wording is that there has been some small changes for the climate change mitigation marker to align it to the Paris Agreement. And so we have a new definition coming in next year. And we're also working on a new definition on adaptation again, to align it with the Paris Agreement. This was discussed yesterday at the WP Stat meeting that is in course now. I hope I made it in time, and I give the floor back to our chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giorgio, and thank you very much, Ola. I think, the challenge that we have today is one of addressing some of the content, and we know we have little time, but I think it was really great to have those dimensions related also to the reporting, because one thing is, of course, to mainstream, but also the other is how do you give visibility to that mainstreaming in the way that you're reporting. So thank you very much for that. I'll turn to Sandra right away for her presentation. And
yeah,
welcome.
Thanks a lot, Sydney, and thanks a lot for the invitation, and also congratulations to the Latvian colleagues for this very important seminar. I will also start sharing my screen. So, and can you see it?
Perfect. Yes.
Perfect. Yes. I will basically go through how we at Austria are dealing with mainstreaming, basically on the policy level, but most of my presentation will be with technical mainstreaming at the Austrian Development Agency. This is where I am based. So of course, we are operating at many levels. We have, of course, all the international frameworks, the conventions, the SDGs that are the basis, but of course also as an EU member state, we of course have the various policies on the EU level that of course also affect our mainstreaming. And the Green Deal, Ola had already mentioned, and of course also all of the new various policies that have been adopted recently all have external dimensions that of course also need to be reflected in our own mainstreaming. So basically at the level of policy, we have the Austrian Act on Development Cooperation, which is providing a very good basis for us, as it's already from the year 2003, but still in preserving the environment and safeguarding natural resources has been defined as one of the 3 overarching objectives of Austrian Development Cooperation. This means that we have quite a strong anchoring of mainstreaming at the policy level. Then, of course, we have the 3-year program on Austrian development policy, which is the framework on which we are operating. And we have a specific strategy on environment, climate, and development, and the Austrian climate finance strategy also gives us a certain framework. Then what we have is quantitative goals on integration of environment. Austria is a very fragmented, has a very fragmented ODA landscape. So basically this goal is valid for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is in charge of policy, and for us at ADA. So basically we are required to have 50% of our funding that has the environment marker 1 or 2. Yes, and other ODA actors in Austria have different goals, like for example, the Development Bank. As I mentioned, we have the strategic guideline on environment and development. It's a whole of government. Basically, it's a whole of society, because it's also included. We also included civil society, academia, and a private sector, which defines our strategic aim on environment and climate. And we have a platform on environment and development to follow up the implementation and ensure coherence. Well, it's under revision, but we have already a final draft, and for the upcoming strategy, we will have a certain strategic goals for our environmental mainstreaming. Like, for example, we want to have a higher share of development cooperation that contributes to environment objectives. We want to have a more efficient use of budget allocated to environmental objectives. We want to have a thorough identification and mitigation of negative impacts. And we want to support development objectives by environmental mainstreaming, reduce the impacts of natural disasters, and also to develop capacities and to create an institutional framework at home, at our agency, at our headquarter and levels for adequate environmental mainstreaming. So all these frameworks, we translate this at the level of our agency at ADA level. And so basically at the agency level, we have various tools and entry points for environmental mainstreaming. One important is raising awareness with the partners and within our own staff through trainings. So we also have, for example, when we have environment trainings at our coordination offices, we also always invite also our partner institutions, so that we have also reach out beyond ADA. We have, of course, a mainstreaming and quality assurance, and we have a tool that is called EXIM, which is an integrated tool. It's covering environment, gender, and social impact management. And we have technical backstopping at all steps, and of course also greening our operations and our carbon footprint. So how we are dealing with our operations is also, of course, also one aspect. So just very shortly on this EXIM that I already mentioned, it's as I said, it's an integrated tool that covers all our cross-cutting issues. And just as a history, like we are doing environment and gender appraisals for more than 30 years now. And in 2015, we came up with an environment and social impact management manual, and with a revision we did in 2018, we also integrated gender to really have a one-stop tool and manual for all cross-cutting issues that also defines our processes, and it's meant for our part when we are extending funding for partners, but also for ADA as an implementing agency for third-party funds, as we are, of course, doing delegated cooperation projects under the EU, and also we are accredited to the Green Climate Fund. So this also applies for us in these roles. Just very briefly what this is for. So we want to enhance the environment, gender, and social outcomes of our programs and projects, and also to strengthen potentials for gender equality and women empowerment. And we want to avoid negative impacts, and we want to minimize and mitigate negative impacts where avoidance is not possible, but also we want to see it as a tool to strengthen capacities of partners and at ADA. And also it's a tool for ensuring stakeholder participation. So just as it was mentioned before by Ola, I think it's something that, and also the EXIM, it covers the whole project cycle. So just to see what are the tools, so all the where you have the full color, these are all tools that are basically covered by the EXIM, and the other ones where you have just the writing in colored. This is tool where environment needs to, tools that the environment needs to be integrated. Of course, we have in the identification and formulation phase a number of tools. I know there are a lot of acronyms. It's basically it depends on the risk level. So it's basically whether you have an appraisal for environment, gender or social outcomes, or an XIA would be an impact assessment, which is if you have higher risk for negative impacts. Well, of course, you have the inception phase where also certain studies can be done. And during implementation, you have, if you have higher risk levels, we have like risk management and sustainability plans, but we also have monitoring and reporting, and of course, revision of indicators on how we track really the mainstreaming of environment and climate. And of course, also to integrate this in the midterm or final evaluation circles, and then of course cycle it back. Well, the next slide, it has a lot of text in it. I just wanted to showcase all the different steps and how what kind of questions or what kind of considerations on environmental mainstream need to come from the project owner, or what we as an environment team at ADA are doing to backstop and support the project owners would be either the partners that are applying for funding, or in case of third-party finance project, this role would be performed by us internally. So I think what is very important, and because Ola also mentioned the transitional, so the transformational change, I think the project identification phase, it's getting more and more important, because this is where we really can change also the type of projects, how we are planning, what kind of projects we want. And of course, it's really important to keep up the mainstreaming through the whole project cycle. And just one last slide, and this is my final one. It's we had an evaluation of our environment, gender and social management system in 1919, and basically we had some lessons learned, some takeaways, and I think they very much correspond also to what came out in the OECD mainstream review. So basically, the commitment of management is key. It's really important also to seize opportunities and tap into ongoing processes where you can really create additional commitment. And effective mainstreaming requires resources. It's really important to have it not only the environment advisors or environment team being responsible for mainstream, but really make it an agenda for the whole organization. And this is something, of course, that is maybe also typical for ADA typically, but of course it needs to be fit for purpose and flexible. And we have, of course, the challenge of the two identities, being a funding agency, but also being a project implementer for third-party funding project, which makes it, of course, quite difficult to have a one-size-fits-all approach, and monitoring. It's a challenge, and you really need to have a balance between what is headquarter doing and what can be done by field-based monitoring and feedback. So with this I hand back to Sydney.
Thank you so much, and I think some of the slides will be really important and interesting for the Latvian colleagues. I think the slide really on what is expected from the project owner and what is expected from the environment team in terms of how to integrate really that mainstreaming in every stage, I think it is quite interesting, as also the Latvian colleagues are building on building guidelines for the mainstreaming. So I think it's quite it was really interesting to see all the complexity, the challenges. Also, thanks for being also very open about the challenges that remain. I think that's there is no easy way into to that mainstreaming. So thank you very much. I will maybe now turn to our colleague Jānis Brizga from the NGO Green Liberty for some remarks and some reflection based on this discussion and bringing also this Latvian perspective and on where in a way where are we currently on that dimension in the Latvian system.
Yes, thank you very much. It was really pleasure and interesting to listen to all the presentations of this morning. I myself am working for an environmental group, Green Liberty in Latvia. We are also working quite a lot on the European level and internationally. And maybe here I will bring more practitioners' perspective on these issues, as we've been working with development education and climate change in particular, both in advocacy work as well as in environmental education field and campaigns and actions. Additionally, we've been involved in monitoring of EU funds, both on the program level as well as on the project level. So we have some experience in looking at this, how, I mean, the integration and the mainstreaming of the horizontal priorities on EU projects, which have been on agenda for quite some time. So I think there is some similarities. What I can see from different projects and different programs that there is a gap between what is written in the projects and what is actually implemented during the implementation. I think this is very crucial, and we really have to think and look how we can bridge this gap and how we can that it's not just rhetorics, you know, when for the project implementation, for the successful application, you are promising everything you have to get the maximum points for the project. And then when you actually have to implement it, you come up with a lot of problems and barriers, how you can actually reach these goals and targets you have promised. Of course, for many development projects, or most of the development projects, maybe the climate change is not the main priority, main focus of the project. So the project developers don't have internal knowledge, internal capacity, maybe to really assess the impacts of the project or potential positive effects. So we have to keep that in mind. For the talking about the climate, I think there are two main focus areas which were already mentioned by some of you. So from one side, it's mitigation, so actions how we actually can reduce the climate impact, and this is also twofold. It's from one side, it's a reduction of emissions of greenhouse gases, which are usually linked to use of fossil fuels or land use change actions and so on in electricity, heat, and transport sector. So this is one side. Another side is enhancing the sinks because in the natural systems, carbon is absorbed by the photosynthesis. So this is additional focus. We can look how we can actually enhance these carbon sinks, especially in agricultural land use actions like forestry. Now we talk a lot about the carbon harvesting, so that's additional focus of the agriculture. But additionally to mitigation, climate adaptation is getting more and more attention, because we understand that even if we implement all the actions today, we will not change the course of the climate change immediately. So we have to look at the possible adaptation actions. So thinking about how we can reduce our vulnerability to harmful climate impacts, both on national, community, and individual level. So these two elements, I think, have to be covered when we talk about the climate mainstreaming in development projects. Additionally, there are also several other goals linked to the climate change, climate action. And one of them, which for us has been very important, is climate equity, which is, I think, very well also linked to development cooperation. So reducing poverty, gender equity, and there are more and more studies, more and more actions looking at this climate and gender, climate and poverty related nexus, which is we understand that climate change is affecting a lot of communities in different ways, and the different social groups also in a different ways. So that's additional angle we have to keep in mind when talking about the climate action mainstreaming in development projects. What actually the project developers can do, I identified two main kind of areas. So one is reducing carbon footprint of the action itself. So thinking how you can actually decrease climate impacts or environmental impacts in general while implementing the project itself. And that could be linked to reducing flights, reducing unnecessary maybe, or thinking how you can best do by decreasing the transportation effects. These are transportation related, I think, impacts usually are some of the biggest for development projects. At least that's my feeling. I don't have really data for that, but I believe that. And to do it properly, I think it's necessary to have some simple climate or carbon footprint assessment tool to be able to understand which of the actions are meaningful to reduce, which are bring the biggest climate impacts, and think about this. Not pick some kind of marginal element which actually doesn't really reduce your climate impacts, but you spend a lot of effort and energy on this. And additional one more element, I think, is trying to understand how you can actually support different institutions, communities, or individuals in just transition and decarbonization strategies, so that these actions you are implementing help these institutions and communities move away maybe from polluting actions and look also for the support for renewables, improvements in efficiency. Also, adaptation action, I think, here is very important, so that you are not supporting kind of lock-in situations where in longer term these institutions and communities will face with some kind of climate related problems. From what was said, I picked up also I think it's very important to look throughout the project cycle, not just project development, drafting of the project goals and ideas, but also go keep this climate focus also during the implementation, during the monitoring and reporting. So that would help self-learning process also for how you can improve these activities in the future, and improve your accountability to also to the stakeholders and the funders, so that you can also use these results in communications, and both internally as well as external communications. For just to conclude, I think we need some kind of simplified, maybe easy tools, and I saw from some of the presentations from Austrian colleagues, from Swedish colleagues, there are such tools to help the climate impact evaluation tools, like or checklists for project developers, how they can actually see and cross-check if they have done what is necessary. So that's short reflection from my side, and I hope there are more questions or comments from others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jānis, and very interesting reflections, and also indeed making the link between the basically what's written in the project to what is actually implemented, and I think that's indeed relates to the different phases of the project, and how in a way including that mainstreaming dimension only in the call for proposals, or the initial assessment of project has to be followed by monitoring, by evaluation of these dimensions, and that in a way that shouldn't be faded away with time and with the project cycle implementation. Is there any questions? I do have two questions, and we're running just a bit behind schedule, but I want to allow at least for 5 minutes of questions and answers. Do I see question whether in the chat or in the participants list? But maybe for me, then I'll ask maybe a question to both the OECD colleagues and Sandra on for project implementers. What are for you maybe the key questions we need to ask them, and the key commitments that they have to make? And then for Jānis, maybe from your Latvian perspective as an NGO, what could be the incentives that can be given to organizations that apply for funding and for Latvian funding to better include that environmental dimension? I don't know. Maybe who wants to begin? Maybe Sandra, and then maybe Ola, and then Jānis.
Okay, so I take the question on what. Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I think it really depends also on what are you aiming at. Yeah, I think it's not enough to just avoid negative impacts. I think we are beyond this. We really need to enhance positive contributions, because what we hear from the IPCC reports, I think we really need also development cooperation needs to make active contributions. So I think you would also need to ask applicants to really showcase how they intend to contribute to achieving also these positive outcomes, not only to make sure that there are no negative impacts on the environment and climate, but also to really also think beyond just avoiding negative impact. Also in sectors that are maybe not so where it's not so evident. Yeah, of course in water energy it's very evident, or in agriculture, but also in other sectors. And yeah, I just want also to comment on the point. I think you really also need to strike a balance on how much time and how much effort you invest in really getting the proposals right to integrate the environment language. because also for us, it's really a challenge, because we spend so much time on asking, well, another word, another sentence on this, and then this time is also then missing on really following up that this is actually implemented. I think it's really needed that you also include this in the budgets, in the indicators, where you're really able then to follow up, and you have the tools also available to measure and to see whether this has been actually implemented or not just have been some nice words that have been included to please the donor. Yeah, I think this is really important. Okay.
Thank you so much. Ola, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Sydney, and thanks, Sandra. I think of a quite comprehensive and good list of things to have in mind. So I think I mean, from my perspective, I think it would be important, of course, to see how is this linked with the overarching needs of the country or the situation in place. Is it linked to the national planning? Is it linked to the development plans and the idea for how this contributes to the sort of a sustainable development pathway in a good way? So it's not a standalone, but links to the bigger picture. And coming back to the resources, are there really the resources and capacities in place to actually follow up on all the commitments that are made? And perhaps just briefly then, how does it, because I mean, many projects, I mean, if you talk about achieving sustainable development pathways, it's really a matter of building larger systems, it's larger interventions. So how does this puzzle piece fit with other puzzle pieces? Are we engaged with the other actors that are doing initiatives or efforts to push the system in a certain direction? So is it engaged with the sort of the ecosystem that is needed to achieve real meaningful change? So that would be some perhaps more general things to think about, I think.
Thanks very much, Ola. Jānis, and then I see that Anna has a question too. So Jānis, please, and then Anna.
I think the main motivation for the project developers to include the climate action or climate questions in the project, from one side, it's of course you can get more scores for the project if these kind of criteria are integrated in an evaluation system of the funding system. So that drives the action in a project development. But I think it's maybe more important is to see actually how these climate actions can support your goals and how they are actually linked to what you are doing. So that you get a broader support and broader achievements of what you are doing, and that's I think should be, that takes some kind of learning from these project developers how it's actually connected.
Thanks very much, Anna. Over to you.
Well, thanks. It was a very interesting discussion, and it's more a comment than a question. So 2 comments from my side. Why should we in the development cooperation mainstreaming? And what are the topics we should select to mainstream? From my point of view, there are 2 big incentives. One is we need champions across government. You know, now I'm talking about the political economy of this. We need champions across government that understand the value added of development cooperation, so they can also support through development cooperation, you know, agendas that they attach a lot of importance. So the climate one is really a driver of change, and it's also a driver in the political context of the governments of support, partnerships, and also scaling up the national agenda and priorities to the global architecture and the global discussions. So when selecting your priorities for mainstreaming, it's very important to see what are the champions that I can have to partner across the government to really implement, as you know, Sandra was saying, because you need to put resources, you need to put the political will to really achieve something in the end. And that's the way of explaining to colleagues in the government why development cooperation is important, because they can link their agenda and have a much more impactful global impact if they link the agenda that they have on climate change and environment and so on with the dimension of what you are doing as donor in developing countries and with others in the multilateral system also. The second point is also for public. Why do we bring these topics also to mainstreaming in development cooperation? It's also because they are a demand from developing countries. Of course, developing countries want to have a holistic proposal coming from the donors, because that's what they are always referring to. But it's also important for citizens to understand what we do. How can we explain to citizens what we do if we don't talk about climate, if we don't talk about gender, if we don't talk about democracy? And for that, we need to be very clear about how we make the linkages between the public policy that is development cooperation and the public policy that is environment, and the public policy that is gender equality, and the public policy that is about human rights, and civic space. So if we manage to do that, then it's much more easy to communicate to citizens about what is the impact that we can achieve together in development cooperation for a better world, for a more peaceful world, for a world where climate will be better, and young people understand that. But if we communicate just talking about development cooperation, tying aid, and so on and so forth, is very difficult for the people, the citizens, to understand what is the purpose. So mainstreaming well and implementing that mainstreaming allow you also to have a different communication to citizens about what you do, and to get the different support from citizens about what you do. But I think, as all the colleagues mentioned, implementation is key, and having the right indicators, the right measurement frameworks, and the right criteria and the right partnerships is fundamental. And I think there the markers also are very important, as was mentioned by Giorgio. Sorry, I just wanted to bring this political kind of, macro perspective on the why. Why should we move this? And as Sydney is always, pushing for me to come in from time to time, I'm just obeying to the boss here in terms of the organization of the setting. Thank you so much for all the interventions from colleagues. Very interesting.
Thank you, Anna, and I think that's great final remarks for this session. And apologies, we are running a bit late, and we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. But I wanted again to thank you all, Sandra, Ola, Giorgio, and Jānis for your participation today. I think it was a very interesting discussion. I think it's lots of fruitful thoughts for our short 10-minute break for coffee, but also I think for the longer term for Latvian colleagues. I think there's a lot of takeaways that can be drawn and integrated in their reflections. So thank you so much.